Chapter 6. Sarah prepared for another fun-filled day in the woods as she finished rolling up the blankets. Vincent scoured the nearby bushes for something to eat. Her stomach grumbled and she groaned inwardly. Berries would not be enough to fill them up. But she wasn't ready to eat the emeries yet. She'd only taken 4 of them and they wouldn't last long. She zipped up the bag and stood up to stretch. Lifting on her toes, she reached her arms to the sky, working out the kinks from a long night sleeping. On the ground, she grimaced and scrunched her face up as a sharp pain sliced through her injured arm. How the hell did I forget about that? You okay? Vincent asked as he approached, eyeing her worriedly. Arm, she explained, gingerly rubbing at the sore flesh. Vincent walked around her, his hands gently grazing over the bandaged area. The wrap seems to have held up but should probably be checked and changed. We'll stop by the river. Make sure we get it washed out and rebandaged. Vincent replied. I'm okay, Sarah assured, giving him a weak smile. Did you find anything to eat? There weren't too many berries left in the bushes, he explained, holding out his crumpled shirt. A few handfuls of the sweet fruit lay in his makeshift basket. It will have to do. Thanks. It wasn't much and would do little to fill her. But it would do. She sat down on the ground and spread her feet out in front of her, wanting to stretch. We should go over our plan too. You still want to take them out? Vincent asked, watching her as he scooped some berries into his hand and plopped them into his mouth. They will not stop hunting us, and I don't think they're going to let us out of the area. I don't know how they found us exactly, maybe the fire, maybe they caught our scent. Regardless, the best defense is a strong offense. Did you play sports? Vincent teased. Sarah took a few berries as she rolled her eyes, nodding. What did you play? Softball. How did I not know that? Vincent asked, grinning. Sarah shrugged. You came in the late spring and the season had already ended. We didn't play well enough to make it into the playoffs this year. Vincent chewed on his berries. I saw your swing, you're pretty good. I'm thinking we should get you a club to use as a weapon. Like you said, we need a good offense. First thing we need to do is mask our scent. We'll need to rub our clothes and ourselves down with leaves and dirt. Even then, your shoulder could give us away. You'll need to be careful not to let it get infected, as well as not letting it reopen. Blood is a powerful scent. Wolves can smell it from miles away. Fantastic, she muttered. We could use it to our advantage though. He started slowly. Sarah met his eyes and waited for him to continue. Her stomach turned as she realized where his train of thought was going. You'd be the bait. Then I would attack when they least suspect it. Only problem is we wouldn't know how many of them we'd be luring in. If we get too many, we risk being captured. If we do this, I want a weapon, Sarah admitted. She picked up a branch with the circumference of a finger and twirled it in her hands. Do you think we could make one? It's not a bat, but it would be effective. She held it up for him. You'll want to make sure it's sharp enough to puncture the skin and thick enough not to break when you stab them, he replied. Sarah picked up a stone from the ground and started working it against her stick to make a point. Vincent scrubbed a hand through his hair. We can't take on more than 2, maybe 3. I can only take on so many, and with your injured arm you will have a hard time in a fight. I know you are more than capable of handling yourself, but I don't want to take any unnecessary risks. Me neither. Getting caught is not an option I'm willing to consider, Sarah said honestly. The Lunas wanted her to be a breeder. The thought of a life in captivity made bile rise in her throat. She gagged, shuddering at the same time. That is not going to happen. Vincent walked alongside Sarah as she followed a trail through the trees. They had spent most of the morning in pursuit of their enemies. So far the woods were silent. He couldn't decide if that was a good thing or not. If they'd evaded their assailants, then maybe they were better off continuing on away from danger. He didn't like the idea of putting Sarah into such a precarious situation. She'd already been through so much the past few months, and he would kill anyone who tried to hurt her again. The innate need to protect her was overwhelming. The yearning to be near her consumed him. He couldn't quite explain it. There was something about being with her that just felt right. He could talk to her about anything. He'd told her things he'd never talked about with anyone, though she'd called him a friend and he had reciprocated the feeling to her. But he knew it was more than that, at least for him. Besides, she was still broken up over Preston, and he didn't want to ruin what they had. Not to mention he didn't know the first thing about being in a relationship. He would probably screw it all up and then lose her completely. You want to take a break and stop for lunch? Sarah asked tiredly. Are we going to eat those awful silver packets of food, because I think I'd rather starve, he joked. The idea of eating preserved dehydrated food was disgusting. Despite how awful they taste, they have lots of nutrients which we both need, she pointed out. And when you're starved, anything tastes good. Hey, I've seen the ramen noodles you eat during lunch at the cookie jar. Maybe you can eat crap like that, but I'm spoiled. I grew up with a home-cooked meal on the kitchen table for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day of my life. He smirked as she took a seat on a fallen log. Your mom can cook, she commented as he set the bag down and plopped down next to her. Do you want to share one or eat a whole one each? Vincent thought about it for a moment, weighing his options. Let's share. Don't think I can stomach a whole one myself, and better safe than sorry. We might need to ration our food. Sarah dug into the bag and produced their lunch. I'm salivating already, Vincent smiled. Sarah bumped him with her elbow as she laughed. Stop. Sorry, I'm just mentally preparing myself for the assault my taste buds are going to endure, he continued with a laugh. You're insufferable, she commented, tearing into the package. Maybe, but you think I'm funny. Sarah giggled, her sapphire eyes lighting up brightly. She offered him the tray of dehydrated, preserved food first. He picked up a piece of what he thought was meat and placed it in his mouth. Well, Sarah grinned. Vincent coughed as he attempted to chew the food, if you could call it that, and not spit it out. It's even worse than I imagined. I swear you're trying to poison me. Sarah picked up a piece of food and plopped it in her mouth. My mom wasn't much of a cook, and my dad worked long hours as a doctor. We ate a lot of takeout growing up, but we always had dinner together. I need a drink of water. You need to eat more, Sarah replied, ignoring him. You're trying to kill me. It's not that bad, she laughed. Says the takeout queen. Hey. His stomach rumbled loudly. Despite the horrid taste of the food, he couldn't deny his hunger, especially if he wanted any hope of shifting. He closed his eyes and swallowed the dreadful thing. The taste caused his stomach to lurch, the animal in him wanting nothing to do with the dehydrated. Who knows? Long it's been that way piece of meat. Once he was sure the food was going to stay down, he opened his eyes and reached back into the container. His fingers brushed up against Sarah's soft, dainty hand. She pulled back, her gaze flickering to his. Sorry, she whispered, clasping her hands together. It's okay, you go ahead, he replied, not taking his eyes off her. She smiled and looked down at the food, then back up at him. Sarah was so close, her perfect pink, full lips mere inches from his. Her chest heaved as she leaned in toward him. His eyes flickered to her mouth, watching as her tongue darted out, wetting her lips. Did she want to kiss him as much as he wanted to kiss her? Nervously, he lifted his hand and pushed her golden hair out of her face, slowly closing the gap between them. Her warm breath puffed against his face, and she blinked before letting her eyes fall shut. Mustering up the courage to close the distance, he leaned closer. A loud rumble jolted him back to reality. He pulled away from her and shot to his feet. What is it? Sarah asked, looking around wildly. Did you hear something? She shouted at him. I hear a truck, he stated, putting a finger over his lips and motioned for her to follow him. Sarah wrapped up the food and shoved it into the sack. She picked up their bag, zipped it up, and slung it on her back in case they needed it and didn't have time to come back for it. Once she'd finished packing up, she crept after Vincent. Vincent pushed through the dense auburn foliage. They came to a small creek bed. He walked across the stones one at a time. The vehicle screeched and whined loudly as it drew closer. He turned to Sarah, and she nodded for them to check it out. Vincent continued moving through the brush. The trees finally ended, and he could make out the black road ahead. He ducked down in the brush, and Sarah crouched next to him, waiting for the vehicle. Waves of heat radiated off the pavement. The squeak grew even louder as a red pickup grumbled to a stop across the street. Sarah drew in a deep breath as the front and passenger doors both opened and slammed shut with a thump. Are they wolves? She whispered so low he barely heard her. Vincent inhaled, closing his eyes. The distinct woodsy scent of wolves entered his nostrils, and he nodded. He recognized the scent. Luna's men. This was the opportunity they were waiting for. They were going to take advantage of the situation. He crept closer and ducked down behind a fallen log. I only see the two. We could get the truck and have a way out of here, she mumbled. We just need to draw them far enough away from the truck so we can take it. I'll distract them while you go in for the kill, Sarah volunteered. Are you sure? He questioned. I can do this. The more of them we take out, the less of a threat they are. She reasoned. Be careful. You have your weapon, Buffy. Sarah smiled at his joke and patted her boot. She rolled up her pant leg and slowly withdrew the sharpened stake. Ready? She asked, moving her hair over to one shoulder as she watched the two men. Vincent grasped her hand in his and gave it a firm squeeze. I'll see you in a minute, he promised. Sarah closed her eyes and relished in the safety of Vincent's touch. She blew out of breath as she tucked her weapon against her arm and thigh, hiding the point in her palm. She got to her feet and hopped over the log and ran into the street, forcing herself to limp as she went. Oh, thank God, she exclaimed. Please help me. One man turned around, his dark brown eyes widening as he took her in. The other man leaned forward against the hood of the truck. Everything okay? The brown-eyed man asked. No, but it will be. I had an accident in the woods. My boyfriend. We got separated. I don't know where he is, she sputtered, hoping she sounded disoriented. Calm down, little lady, the man said, pushing off the truck. He sauntered toward her, a wry smile on his face. Her stomach curdled as he slid a hand back through his long, slicked onyx-colored hair. We'll get you into town and alert the proper authorities. You're safe now, he grinned, giving her a toothy smile. Sarah shuddered but forced a smile on her face as she sighed. Thank you. Come on, the brown-eyed man said, grasping her arm. Sarah reacted on instinct. She slipped her stake down into her palm, swung her arm back, and jabbed the sharp edge into the man's abdomen. The man grunted and pitched forward, his hands flying to his belly. Sarah backed up, her eyes honing in on the red blotch forming on his white shirt. Oh God, I can't believe I really just did that. Her hands trembled. She watched horrified as he dropped to his knees and fell forward onto his palms. What the hell? The other wolf started as he ran forward. Vincent darted out of the trees and tackled the unharmed enemy to the ground, punching him repeatedly in the face. Sarah watched as the two men rolled across the pavement, both throwing punches and kicks. Sarah desperately tried to keep up with the movement as her eyes darted back and forth to get a fix on whether Vincent needed her help. Consumed by the fight, she barely noticed something was grazing against her thigh until it latched around her wrist. She gasped and tucked her arm away, but the man she stabbed held her and refused to let go. Panic bubbled up inside her, causing her pulse to roar in her ears. She balled her free hand and struck out, connecting with the man's nose. A sickening crack filled the air as he yelped. Sarah stumbled backwards, putting a safe distance between her and the injured man. She let her eyes drift from her enemy to Vincent. The latter of the two slowly stood up from the ground, brushing sand and dirt from his clothes. He held up a pair of keys. Need a lift? He smiled, goofily, even though his voice was serious. Sarah blinked, momentarily frozen in place, before sprinting to the passenger door. She opened the door and hopped in, slamming it shut behind her. Vincent jammed the key into the ignition and turned it over. The truck roared to life, lurching forward as he pressed down on the pedal. You okay? Vincent asked, glancing between her and the rearview mirror. I think so. You? She whispered, looking down at her fingers. Her hands were crimson-colored from her actions. Her fingers shook and she cried out as she tried to wipe the mess on her pants. Vincent's hand clamped down over hers. It's okay. I just want to get it off, she hissed. We'll find a spot to clean up as soon as we can, he assured. Okay, she whispered, inhaling sharply. She closed her eyes, remembering the cool dead eyes of the man she'd killed back at the Harris Ranch. The only thing she could remember was rage. She'd beaten him relentlessly even after he'd stopped moving. It haunted her. A shudder rippled down her spine as she recalled that evening. She'd been covered in blood then, too. She'd been in a fit of rage. She hadn't been thinking then. Today was different. She knew what she was getting into. Mostly, it terrified her how easily she had attacked and killed a man. It's always hard when you take someone else's life. I'm not sure you ever get over it, but you must keep in mind it was self-defense. Those were Luna's men. And you can bet their intentions for us weren't good. If you want to talk about it, we can, Vincent suggested. It's different when you're in your right mind. When you can see them, she said, staring at the open road. Last time. She paused, clearing her throat. They were hurting Lark and Nora. I could only see red. The only thing on my mind was protecting Lark. It is different, he agreed. But you have to remember, Sarah, we are at war. And we have to protect ourselves. It's them or us. Come here, he opened up his arm and she slid in next to him, resting her head on his shoulder. Sarah closed her eyes and relaxed against his firm, comforting body. Vincent made her feel safe. Her frazzled body seemed to agree, her heart slowed and her breathing evened out. Her reverie was broken when a loud beep followed by a crackle filled the vehicle. Her eyes caught sight of a walkie-talkie as a voice shouted over the intercom. They took our truck, a man growled out. Sarah moved away from Vincent, snatching the black walkie-talkie clipped to the visor above her head. Where are you? Another voice demanded. About 2 miles from the sheriff's office, the first voice responded. Chip, get a hold of Sheriff Morris. Have him set up a blockade. They cannot be allowed to leave, the other voice barked. Barricade the highway now. Sarah gulped and turned to Vincent. Do you think we can make it out of here? Vincent ran a hand through his hair as he punched the gas. The trees whizzed by faster. A loud wail sounded behind them and Sarah turned in her seat, groaning as flashing lights blinked. Chapter 7. Sarah gripped the tan leather headrest as she peered out the back window. Blue and red lights danced across the interior of the vehicle and the loud wail of sirens set every nerve in her body on edge. He's gaining on us, Vincent stated. Sit down and buckle up. She twisted around, plopped down and quickly snapped the seat belt into the buckle. Her eyes flicked to the speedometer. They were going dangerously fast. She hoped Vincent knew what he was doing behind the wheel. See if there is a cell phone in here anywhere. We could call Dev, Vincent instructed. Sarah looked in the cup holders, then opened the center console and dug through the contents. When that turned up nothing, she opened the glove box. Exasperated, she leaned forward to check the floorboards. There had to be something in here. It looks like we just got the walkie-talkie, Sarah sighed, deflated. I don't suppose that will call Abilene, Vincent huffed. The handheld device crackled as a voice came over the comm. We got a blockade. Set up a few miles ahead. Sarah shook her head. Her stomach lurched, churning uncomfortably as they neared the turn. Yeah, I highly doubt we'll be calling anyone, she murmured, glancing at the road. We can't call home, but at least we can hear what's going on as long as we are in range, she said, peering out the windshield. The road in front of them was empty, but she could make out a bend ahead and wondered if that's where the Lunas were. Looks like we'll be testing the four-wheel drive. Ever been off-roading before? Vincent asked. You know, they say you don't really get a real feel for something until you've experienced it firsthand, she said, holding her breath and willing the nervous jitters away. Sarah gripped the handrail as they whipped around the corner. About a quarter of a mile up the road there was a barricade. A police cruiser, 2 white cars and a pickup all lined the street. Vincent slammed on the brakes, sending her flying forward. The seat belt constricted across her chest and threw her back into the seat. Vincent shifted the gears on the truck and punched the gas. He steered them down into the ditch. The truck shook, bumping from side to side as they moved over the uneven terrain. Sarah squeezed her eyes shut, unable to watch. They were going to crash, she didn't want to know. Hold on to something, Vincent instructed as the car lurched to the side. She was thrust to her left and the jarring bumps stopped. Anxiously she peeked one eye open, then the other. They were back on the road. Relief washed over her. Now they just needed to leave their pursuers in the dust. Sarah looked back, craning her neck to see behind them. The vehicles scrambled to turn around so they could follow. Their car groaned as Vincent stepped on the gas and made a sharp right turn. Her body listed to the side, colliding with the door. Vincent turned again at the next road, causing the tires to squeal as they fought to keep their traction on the pavement. Vincent held the wheel steady as he gained control of the truck. The walkie-talkie exploded with chaos as the Lunas yelled at each other Through the device. Sarah let out a relieved breath. We got away, but where are we going? Does Vincent have a plan? Do you know where you are going? She asked over the commotion. Not really. I just wanted to make sure we lost them. Sarah gazed out the back window. So far no one was behind them. She held her breath, watching for movement on the road. Several long, agonizing moments passed before she slumped down in her seat. I think we're good, she said. Relieved. Great. Now we just need to find a spot to lie low until it gets dark. They have the sheriff working with them, then they more than likely have this vehicle listed as stolen. Where are we going to hide out? Sarah questioned. I haven't decided yet, Vincent replied. You're alarmingly good at this, she observed. I've had a little practice. Running from the law? She asked, frowning. What could Vincent possibly have done that warranted running from the police? No, he muttered. Evading my dad. He punched the small radio dial and rock. Music erupted into the car. Oh. She clasped her hands together, unsure what to say to him. I'm sorry. Heat engulfed her face. A simple apology wouldn't change anything, nor would it take away the thick, awkward silence between the two of them. The radio still blared and scouts continued to come over the comm. Yeah, me too, Vincent said after a long moment. He stared straight ahead. His grip on the wheel tightened, turning his knuckles pale white. Sarah swallowed and looked out her window. Her heart clenched as she thought about all the horrors the McKinleys and Harrises endured. She couldn't imagine growing up like that. It made her wish there was something more she could do for him. Vincent pulled into the parking lot and set the car in park. He surveyed the lot before switching the ignition off and turning to his companion. Sarah sat slumped against the window. Her blonde hair was draped over her face like a curtain. He could tell by her soft, even breathing that she was sleeping soundly. Reaching out, he brushed the pads of his fingers over her forearm. Her skin was smooth except for where she had cuts. Sarah. He gently shook her. Wake up, he coaxed. Sarah groaned and sat up straighter, yawning as she met his eyes. Where are we? Near a bus station. I thought we should get some clothes first, he said, nodding to a store. Sarah stretched and followed his gaze. Sounds good. Feel pretty gross. How? Do you want to work going in? We both have blood on our clothes and aren't exactly presentable for public outings. I think we both look equally horrible. We may as well both go in together, Vincent stated. Sarah pulled down the visor and looked into the mirror. She ran her fingers through her golden locks, but her fingers quickly got tangled in the knotted mess. She huffed and dropped her hands into her lap. Ready? He asked. I suppose so. You look great, he stated. Sarah narrowed her eyes, fixing him with a pointed glare. He couldn't help but wonder if he'd offended her. You do. We had a little wilderness adventure. You look beautiful and rustic. Even with mud stuck to her clothes and smudges of dirt on her face, she was beautiful. Humph. Let's just get in and out, he insisted, hoping the matter would get dropped. Sarah hopped out of the car and hissed as her face contorted in pain. You okay? All that running and climbing has caught up to me. My muscles are stiff and sore. Guess my adrenaline finally simmered down. You'll feel better once you get in some clean clothes and a hot shower. Sarah smiled and took his offered arm, hobbling along beside him. If they sold hot showers here, I would definitely buy one. You and me both. Vincent led the way into the store and grabbed a cart. They grabbed a few necessities, toothbrushes, toothpaste, and soap to get themselves cleaned up. Before heading to the clothing area, he quickly chose a new pair of jeans, package of boxers, some socks, a ball cap, new sneakers, and a black tee. Before they headed over to the women's section, he leaned against a shelf as Sarah started thumbing through the bras. I've always been partial to lace, he joked. He picked up a lacy mulberry bra. That would complement her creamy ivory skin nicely. Sarah snatched the bra out of his hand and held it out in front of her as if she were critically inspecting it. Take a good look at it now. You won't be seeing it again, she grinned as she picked up a pair of matching panties. Vincent swallowed thickly. She wasn't challenging him, was she? Sarah spun on her heel and walked across the aisle to the clothes. He watched as she thumbed through the sea of hanging pants. You're not one of those women who takes a year to find an outfit, are you? He questioned as he leaned against a stand, watching her. Maybe you can pick out an outfit in 5 seconds, but I can't. You should know better than to bring a woman clothes shopping, she smiled. Please find something quickly. He opened his mouth to protest when she picked up a purple tank top and black sweatpants. Without a word, she turned to another shelf and snatched a hoodie from the hanger. I'm ready. You taking pity on me? He teased. Only on your credit card. Vincent laughed and she chuckled too. I think I'm rubbing off on you, he replied. She was definitely rubbing off on him. He wasn't ready to go home. Although this time with her had been crazy, he wouldn't change it. He'd gotten to know her a little bit when they worked together at the cookie jar, but relying on someone like this was completely different. Sarah was special and, despite his growing attraction to her, he was determined not to mess this up. She deserved someone better than him, and he wouldn't be the one to drag her down. Sarah stared at the bus schedule. It had been a long day, and even though it was only a little after 8, her heavy eyes were having a hard time focusing on the words. She closed her eyes for a second and then forced them open again. There was a route into Dallas that wouldn't leave until tomorrow morning. She chewed on her lower lip, wondering if they should wait that long. It was anyone's guess how long they had until the Lunas discovered them. They had abandoned the pickup at the store and walked the quarter-mile to the bus station. If the Lunas were smart, they would put 2 and 2 together, but maybe it would give them some reprieve, at least until they were safely on the bus. Staying at the bus station for any length of time was dangerous. Her stomach churned and she balled her fists up. If the Lunas found the truck, though, they would quickly put together that she and Vincent were going into the Dallas station and could easily pick them off. Their only option to avoid capture would be to call for help. Sarah sighed and ran a hand through her hair. What is it? Vincent asked. They're going to know we took the Dallas bus. We're going to lead them right to Abilene, she growled as she sat down on the wooden bench. Vincent pointed to the corner. It's okay. We'll use the payphone and call Dev as soon as it's available, Vincent comforted. Sarah looked at the 2 archaic phones. An elderly gentleman occupied one, while a large out-of-order sign covered the other. But the Lunas' focus isn't on our family right now. Right now they want us, she whispered as she looked back down at the schedule in her hands. Tears pooled in her eyes. She blinked, not wanting to draw attention to herself. She cleared her throat and sighed. If we bring them there, they could team up with Malachi. They still have more wolves than us. I want to get home, but I don't want to put everyone there in danger. We only know what we overheard in the stream the other day. I'm not sure how many days ago that was, but their plans could have changed. Vincent pointed out. I know, but if the Lunas come to Abilene, they could decide to go after us before Malachi. Emma was the Alpha's wife or the Alpha's son's wife, I'm not sure, but anyway, we took his kids and wife. He's going to want them back. He'll already be there. Bringing more enemies into our territory isn't safe. They might not follow us. It's possible they could leave it up to Malachi to collect us. Vincent, they got a girl's body to show Lark and Devin we were dead. They've chased us incessantly. They aren't going to just let us go. They need us, whether to negotiate a trade for Emma or something else, I don't know, but you don't put forth that kind of effort without a motive. What are you suggesting? Vincent asked, taking a seat next to her. Sarah looked around the lobby. There were a few people there at this hour, but it was mostly empty. Still, she scooted closer to him so they wouldn't be overheard, causing their arms to graze against each other. She ignored the tingling sensation from the innocent touch and focused on the conversation. I don't want anyone else to die if we can help it. Bringing them there will more than likely start an altercation. You didn't see Emma when we first went into the house. She was petrified. I don't want to be the reason she ends up back there, she stated, shivering. If she didn't want that life, she certainly wouldn't subject someone else to it. We need to go someplace else and make sure they know we didn't return to Texas without giving away our actual location. Vincent peered over her shoulder. As he did, his warm breath puffed against her neck, causing her to shiver. He ducked back down, leaning into her. Vincent tapped on the paper and said, we could go to Oklahoma City and then find a way into Guyman. We'd even have a place to stay. There's even a bus leaving tonight. It would get us out of here sooner and be to Oklahoma by morning and Guyman midday. You're home? She asked, turning to meet his eyes. She swallowed, realizing how close he had gotten to her. Their faces were a mere inch apart. Her heart pattered against her ribs as she lowered her gaze to his lips. Yeah, he answered, clearing his throat. He shifted his gaze back to the schedule. Is it safe? She asked, blinking. She needed to focus. I heard my mom talking about selling the place. My mom owns the land. The Lunas and Juarez's might be all about conquering packs, but they aren't going to hang around there and draw attention to themselves. The last thing our kind needs is humans poking around and finding out about us, Vincent said, his eyes darting around the lobby. But what about all the packs that they've attacked, like the Bayou pack? What do they do with the property? Sarah questioned, frowning. They burn it. It removes evidence of our kind, and with a hot enough fire, the bodies of fallen wolves are completely destroyed. They make it look like a tragic accident. They're great about cleaning up after themselves. I'm guessing the only reason my home is still intact is because my mom, the Alpha, is still alive, Vincent explained. He stared down at the schedule again. Look, here is a bus leaving for Las Vegas, Nevada about the same time as Oklahoma, and another leaving for Colorado Springs too. Assuming they have the local police working with them, we just need to make sure the camera sees us going out to one of these two other buses. And then we sneak onto the one we want. It'd be easy to get lost in Vegas, Sarah thought aloud. There are so many people and hotels there. It'd be next to impossible for Luna and his men to find us there. Yeah, but I want to go to Gaiman, Vincent said, squinting. Why? I have an idea. You were talking about the rift between the Lunas and Malachi. I think we can use that to our advantage. Come on, let's go buy our tickets. Vincent stood up and pulled her up with him. My dad had all of Juarez's contact info in his office, and my dad and Charles Luna were friends. I bet we can find something incriminating in his safe. I say we enlighten Malachi about the Lunas. Put them against each other. Sarah grinned. Exactly. Why don't you call Lark and I'll buy our tickets? We'll get tickets to Vegas and board at that area and then sneak onto the Oklahoma bus, he suggested. Sarah glanced at the black and silver phone. Her stomach twisted and a fine sheen of sweat broke out on her forehead. If we call them, they're going to want to come get us. Her bottom lip trembled. Our plan is risky. They've already buried us and think we're dead. They've moved on. Hell, Lark and Devin are probably married. Lark has done so much for me over the past few years. Want to repay the favor. She deserves her happiness, and I'd hate for something to happen to her or Devin because of our plan. Even if we do this on our own, if we call them and fail, they have to mourn us all over again. Think we should wait until we're done to call. It will keep everyone safer. Vincent regarded her for a long moment with a frown before finally nodding his head in agreement. Let's buy those tickets. Chapter 8. Abilene, Texas. Lark walked to the cemetery, 3 bunches of flowers in her hand. The pale moonlight did little to illuminate the dreary scene. Her heart ached with the knowledge her baby sister was laid to rest here. It was bad enough she'd lost her parents. Now her sister was gone too. She set yellow sunflowers, Sarah's favorites, down on the ground. She glanced up at the tiny cross as tears welled in her eyes. It still hadn't sunk in, maybe because she still didn't fully believe it to be true. A nagging feeling tugged at her conscience. Something wasn't right, or maybe she was just crazy or in denial. Am I holding on to false hope? She shook her head, still unsure, as she shuffled the other flowers in her hand, a set of white roses for both Preston and Rick. Leaves crunched behind Lark, and she turned around curiously. She instantly recognized Claire. Her graying brownish hair fell loosely around her face, accentuating her swollen, red eyes. I didn't realize anyone else would be out here. I thought you came in the mornings, Claire stated, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Lark offered the elder wolf a small, sad smile as Claire shifted back and forth, frazzled by Lark's presence. I do usually. I got some flowers. She held up the remaining bouquets. Claire blinked and with a sigh continued forward. I'm not used to anyone else being in the cemetery. It's nice to see someone else here. It's hard on everyone. We all deal with loss in our own way, Lark replied. Honestly, Devin didn't want to visit the graves, and she understood. When her parents passed, she didn't go very often at first either. It had been too painful. Tears welled in her eyes at the memory, and she willed them away. She knew death was a part of life, but hated how everyone around her passed away so tragically and young. Her gaze shifted to Rick and Preston. They had been family too, even if not by blood. Lark separated the two remaining bouquets and set the flowers over Rick and Preston's gravesites. "It's nice that you do this," Claire observed. Lark reached into her purse and pulled out a muffin she had wrapped in a napkin. "I brought something for Vincent too. He loved the chocolate chip muffins." Vincent always joked about it being the way to his heart. Claire stared at her blankly. What is she thinking? Lark wondered as she chewed on her lower lip. "I thought he would appreciate it more than flowers," Lark explained, trying to fill the air to end the awkward silence that stretched between them. When Claire still said nothing, Lark walked forward, unwrapping the muffin and setting it down on the ground by Vincent's marker. She stood up and swallowed. As she met Claire's gaze, the elder woman remained quiet, her eyes vacant. Lark wondered if she should just leave Claire by herself or if she should try to comfort her. "I called the credit card company today," Claire said out of the blue. "Oh," Lark asked, frowning in confusion. "What does that have to do with anything? I gave Vincent a prepaid card a few days before he, Devin, and Emily left Guyman. I had a plan to get Emily out, but I was afraid I wouldn't be able to put my plan into motion without Emmett noticing. I knew Emmett never thought Vincent was capable of doing much. He didn't watch him, and I knew Vincent would do what I asked without question. He didn't even inquire about the card. When I handed it over to him," Claire's voice shook, her bottom lip quivering with each word. Lark moved toward Claire, still unsure of where this was going, but gave Claire her undivided attention. Whatever she was trying to say, it meant something to her. "I never got to put my plan into action. I didn't get the card back either." She breathed as if she were in a state of shock. Lark nodded, encouraging Claire to continue. "I called the company to check on the card to see if it had been used. Maybe. I'm foolish to think he could still be, that they could be alive. There was a substantial amount of money on it, and they said the card had been active for the past 24 hours. It was used at a retail store and a bus station in New Mexico earlier this evening." She looked up at Lark with a hint of a hopeful smile, but then stated, "I think the charges are fraudulent. He would have called to tell us he was well when he got the chance." Claire's voice broke and she buried her face in her hands. "For a moment I thought my baby was alive." "You think Luna's men are using his card?" Lark asked to clarify. Her brain raced as she tried to process what Claire was telling her. Something was definitely going on. "Or someone stole it," Claire muttered. "I shut the card off. I won't be financing any of their plans." Lark's heart thumped painfully in her chest as that nagging feeling returned. What if it really is Vincent? If he is alive, then Sarah could be too. And if Claire shuts the card off, then they will have no money. But why not call for help? There has to be a reason. "I just want him to be at peace. It's bad enough they refused to send us Vincent and Sarah's bodies," Claire cried, her shoulders shaking as violent sobs racked her body. "My baby's gone and now this. It's too much." Lark hurried to Claire and pulled her into a tight embrace. She rubbed soothing circles into the other woman's back, hoping it offered her some solace. Meanwhile, her mind spun as she thought about what Claire had said. She considered sharing her opinion with Claire but thought better of it. The last thing the elder woman needed was more pain. But she would speak to Devin and get his thoughts on the scenario. New Mexico. Sarah adjusted the ball cap on her head and let out a long, nervous breath. They only had one chance to get this right. She closed her eyes and prayed something would go their way. Vincent held out his hand, which she accepted, entwining her shaking fingers with his. For their plan to work, they would need to be seen getting on the bus to Vegas, sneak off, and then board the Oklahoma route undetected. So much was riding on this part of their plan. They couldn't afford any mistakes. Vincent squeezed her hand, as if sensing her unease. "Ready?" he asked. "I think. Remember, cameras are by the door. We want our faces visible, but we don't want them to know we are purposefully being obvious," he reminded. Well, when he put it like that, it seemed so simple, she mused to herself. Maybe she was overcomplicating things. "We got this," he grinned. "Ready to board?" Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice to come out evenly. "Come here," Vincent said, playfully tugging her closer and wrapping his arm around her. Together they started toward the gate. Sarah blinked her eyes, forcing her frazzled nerves to calm. Lean in closer, Vincent instructed. She tilted her head and inhaled his musky scent. He smelled good, a blend of trees and rain. His embrace was safe, and her muscles loosened slightly at the realization. Look up now. Sarah glanced up, meeting the camera's red beam for a split second. She ducked back down and rested her head on Vincent's shoulder. Vincent kept his hand wrapped around her as he handed the tickets to the doorman. I'm sorry, you've got the Vegas bus. Oklahoma is over there, the man stated, pointing. Oh, my bad, Vincent said with a groan. He turned, his chin grazing over her head. My girl's feeling a bit under the weather. I'd hate to wait in line again. Would it be possible to get through here? His girl. She knew Vincent had meant nothing by it, but the idea of it wasn't completely awful. In fact, she was curious about what he'd be like. No, I'm not dating again. It hurts too much. Why am I even thinking about this? Thank you. I really appreciate it, Vincent replied, pulling her along. Through the gate. Sarah stumbled slightly at the unexpected movement. Clearly she needed to pay better attention. She just missed half the conversation between Vincent and the station worker. Our bus is this way. Vincent pointed. Take the hat and sweater off. Just in case there are more cameras out here. When he pulled away, she instantly missed the contact. Flustered by her body's reaction, Sarah took the cap off with a huff and quickly let her locks down. She whipped the sweater over her head and tucked it in the crook of her arm. This way. Vincent took her hand again and led her along the edge of the building. Our chariot awaits, he said, dramatically gesturing to the large stagecoach. Sarah grinned. She both loved and hated how he could get her to smile. Not wanting to dwell on her feelings toward Vincent, she focused on the task at hand. She led the way up the steps and into the cozy bus. The vehicle was still fairly empty, giving them a lot of seating options. She already knew where she wanted to sit and clambered her way to the far back and plunked down next to the oversized tinted window. Let me guess, you like to sit in the back of the class and at movie theaters, too? Vincent asked, taking the seat next to her and slumping back, making himself at home. Yeah, she replied, wondering if he was asking because of the seating choice. Me too. The only bad thing about these seats is we are close to the bathroom. He tapped his nose. I have a strong sense of smell. Do you want to move? She asked, concerned. Only if someone goes in. I like the back. No prying eyes. Vincent waggled his eyebrows suggestively. Sarah laughed. I'm not sure I want to know what that means, she shot back. Don't worry. Only half the things I say are as bad as they sound, Vincent teased. Sarah rolled her eyes as she giggled. You will be the first girl I've ever brought home, he admitted quietly. Well, I guess I can't take that too seriously since no one is there. And I've already met your mother. She paused as a wave of fear gripped her. What exactly are we doing here? Sure, we flirted a little the past few days, but this was different. She didn't know where this was going, but a part of her wanted to find out. Hey, he started, feigning hurt. You should feel special. A part of her wondered if there was some truth to his statement. If he truly never brought someone home before, was she different? Or was it just the circumstances? They had grown closer the past few days, but maybe she was reading too much into it. Sarah opened her mouth to respond when the driver piped up over the loud speaker, announcing they would be leaving shortly. We should get some rest while we can. We have work to do once we get to Guyman, Vincent suggested. Sarah nodded as she stifled a yawn. Exhaustion quickly consumed her, and she slumped down in her seat. If their plan worked tonight, they were safe, even if only for a night. Abilene, Texas. Lark paced back and forth in the kitchen as she waited for Devon to say something. It was late, and they were both exhausted from a hard day at work. But this couldn't wait until morning. She checked the bus schedule at the station closest to Luna's lair, and found a route coming in tomorrow morning. If it was Vincent and Sarah, they needed to act fast. It was hard to gauge how Devon was handling the current information. His face was stoic and didn't show any major emotions. She chewed on her bottom lip, eyeing him. What is he thinking? Maybe he thinks I am crazy. Devon ran a hand over his face and stood up, stopping her in her tracks. Why wouldn't they call, Lark? Don't bus stations have payphones? He paused and let out a frustrated breath as he rested his forehead against hers. We'll go to the train station in Dallas, look around. But I don't want you to get your hopes up. It could be nothing. I know that, she whispered. You know, I never felt Sarah was dead. She told him honestly. Deep down she knew her sister was alive. There was no proof other than her intuition, but her mother had always said to follow her gut, and right now her instincts told her to keep searching. I hope to God you're right, Devon said, pressing a kiss to her brow. What time did you say the buses were arriving? We'll need to leave soon so we can get there ahead of time, Lark said. Closing her eyes, Devon believed in her. At the realization, relief engulfed every cell in her body. We're not going alone. If the Lunas know they bought bus tickets, they could have followed them, Devon said, pulling her into his embrace. The kitchen door creaked open, and she caught sight of movement out of the corner of her eye. Lark pulled back, meeting Daniel's emerald eyes from across the room. I was coming to get something to eat, he said, shifting awkwardly in the doorway before coming in and walking to the cupboard. I couldn't help but over here. I want to go too. Devon stiffened against Lark. The two brothers were working on their issues and making progress, but she wasn't sure they were ready to be in a confined space together for several hours at a time. But Vincent was Daniel's brother, too. Surely they could make it work for the sake of their missing family member. I want to leave in the next 30 minutes, Devon whispered. We'll take 2 cars. I need to speak to Gene and let him know what we're doing. Can you find 5 other guys that will go with us? He addressed Daniel. I'll take care of it, Daniel replied. Devon turned back to Lark. I don't suppose you'll consider staying behind with Gene? Lark glared, crossing her arms over her chest. There was no way in hell she was going to sit around and twiddle her thumbs. If Sarah got off that bus, she wanted to be there. I want you armed, Devon stated, giving Lark a pointed look. He turned to his brother, who was rummaging through the cabinet. Daniel, if Nora comes, I want her carrying a weapon as well. I'll talk to her, Daniel acknowledged, grabbing a granola bar and shutting the cupboard. What about Em? Devon sighed heavily. If she wakes and asks, tell her. Otherwise, let's keep this quiet from her and Mom. They're already broken up enough without giving them something else to worry over. This could be something, or it might just be nothing. Lark closed her eyes and said a silent prayer. This isn't nothing. Sarah is out there. Oklahoma. Vincent frowned as he took the card back from the cashier. He let out an aggravated breath, unsure how they were going to get around for the rest of the morning. After a long overnight bus ride, he just wanted to get some breakfast for Sarah and himself and a ride to Guyman. Obviously that would not happen. He jammed the card in his pocket. Thanks anyway, he mumbled as he met Sarah's eyes. Come on. He placed his hand on her lower back and led her out of the line, leaving the food they'd ordered on the counter. Defeat and embarrassment rolled through him. Why isn't the card working? Did you meet your limit? Sarah asked as they walked out the sliding glass doors. No. I called after my mom gave it to me. It's a prepaid card. We only use prepaid cards because they can't be traced unless you have the number. There was $5,000 on it. Yesterday was the first time I used it, he said, baffled. The money should have been there. Unless they could find some money. They were stuck in Oklahoma City. He knew his mother had cash stored away at home, but they had to get there first. What do we do now? Sarah asked, raking a hand through her hair. Vincent let out a long breath. How many snacks do we have left? I know we bought a few things last night. We still have the 3 MREs, a bag of chips, and a candy bar, Sarah said glumly. I'll die of starvation before eating another MRE. They're not that bad. We need to find a ride, Vincent said, looking around the crowded parking lot. You're not thinking of stealing a car, are you? Sarah asked. What? No. Why? He asked, wondering why she'd asked. You were staring at those cars pretty hard. We need to find a ride, Vincent murmured to himself. I think there is a truck stop a few miles up the road. That's not very safe, Sarah said, apprehension in her voice. I think I'd rather you steal a car. I'm not going to let anything happen to you, he promised. I guess we don't really have much choice, she said, deflated. Vincent met her gaze. She looked exhausted. He grasped one of her hands with his. He needed to take care of her and find her someplace to rest. With her injuries and fatigue, it was only a matter of time before she crashed. He vowed not to let that happen. Now he just needed to figure out how to keep her going for a few more hours. We got out of the woods and away from psychotic werewolves. Think we can manage a ride? He grinned. Sarah sighed, her shoulders slumping. Fine. But you get to sit in the middle. I'm not getting crammed up against some guy I don't know. Well, as long as I get to cuddle up next to you, it's all good, he flirted. It wouldn't be so bad if he got to sit extra close to her. A small smile slipped over her face and she met his eyes briefly before looking out to the road. Let's go, she said, starting to her right. It's this way. Vincent grinned as he grasped her elbow. Sarah shook her head as he tugged her back to him and led the way to the main road. You come to the city often? Sarah asked conversationally, her sapphire gaze fixed on him. Occasionally. He didn't really want to go into the details of when and why he came. Not with Sarah. Wait, what does it matter what she thinks? Shouldn't matter. She was only a friend. But he knew deep down he could only lie to himself for so long. Something had changed in him. For the first time in his life, he wasn't looking at other girls. There was only one who interested him, and she was beyond his reach in more ways than he could count. I'm guessing it was to pick up girls? Sarah replied, quirking her brow up at him. That could be one reason, he admitted, embarrassed she knew him that well. Did you ever consider settling down with any of them? Her question threw him. Why was she asking? Was it just to get to know him, or did she want to know for other reasons? No, he answered honestly. You know, humans aren't supposed to know about us. And I guess I know how to be friendly to people, but in order to be in a relationship, I would have to tell them about myself at some point. I can get people to laugh and smile, but deep down. He paused. He should just say it and get it out in the open. Knowing Sarah, she would try to argue with him. But he knew it was the truth. I don't trust people. I don't know how to connect with them. I'm sure I could have a relationship, but then I'd have to open up, and I know if someone got to know the real me, she wouldn't like who I am. I think you've opened up to me, she drawled. I see you for the funny, caring, intelligent person you truly are. Sarah stopped and met his eyes. When I was shooting at the Lunas, I didn't care what happened. She paused, as her voice grew thick with emotions. I was hurting and just wanted it to stop. Even though these past few days have been horrible, she laughed as tears pooled in her eyes. You brought me back. There is so much more to you than you give yourself credit for. We all have our demons we have to work through. Maybe we can help each other. Vincent swallowed hard, emotion bubbling up in his throat. No one had ever spoken to him so earnestly before. Not to mention believed in him. But here, Sarah was telling him things he never thought he'd hear, and he believed her. It meant more to him than he realized. A car honked loudly, jolting them apart and drawing them out of the moment. Sarah's hand flew to her chest as she laughed, while wiping at her eyes. We should probably keep moving, she said, clearing the air. This probably isn't the best roadside conversation to be having. Vincent closed his eyes and smiled, quickly composing himself. She was right. Of course, deep conversations on the side of the highway weren't exactly practical. Let's go. Chapter 9. Thanks for the ride, Vincent called as he shut the white semi-truck door. Anytime. You all be safe now, the elderly gentleman called as he drove off. Vincent turned to Sarah, watching as she absent-mindedly dragged the toe of her shoe through the gravel. Welcome to my home, Vincent grinned. I hope you're up for a walk. I think the drive is about a mile long. Of course it is, Sarah yawned. I wouldn't expect anything less. You wolves like your land. That we do, Vincent agreed. He paused as he caught sight of a red, white, and blue realtor sign. Looked like his mom really was selling the place. He sighed, running a hand through his hair, unsure how he felt about the situation. You okay? Sarah questioned, stopping to stare at the sign. Yeah, if the house is on the market, it must mean the electricity and water are still on. Think how nice it will be to take a hot shower. He could practically feel the steaming water on his skin. The shower was only a short walk away. He and Sarah started a speedy walk down the drive, both eager to get inside and have a few comforts they'd been without for days. What's the plan? Sarah asked. I figure we'll get cleaned up, eat, and then check out my dad's office. Maybe. Take the night to rest before we call Malachi, Vincent replied thoughtfully. He was tired but his body was okay. It was Sarah he was worried about. She'd taken a lot of hits and had the bumps and bruises to prove it. The last thing he wanted was to push her too hard. Sarah nodded her head, her flaxen hair bobbing up and down like a child's toy. I could use a good night's rest and a good filling meal. Vincent's stomach growled, twisting with hunger. We should order a pizza, he suggested, his taste buds salivating. What about money? Sarah asked. Not a worry now. I know for a fact my mom keeps spare cash around the house. In various spots. We should have enough to get us pizza and anything else we need. My dad's car is still here, I believe. If it is, we'll have a vehicle. Always did want to drive his BMW. I was never allowed to, though. I was too reckless, Vincent joked. You still are, Sarah quipped with a grin before adding. It sounds like Emmett was on a power trip in every aspect of his life. Yeah. Was he always like that? Sarah asked. Vincent thought back. It would be nice to have at least one fond memory of his father. No, he answered. But he was never really involved with us. Except for Daniel. My mom was the one that took care of everything for the rest of us. We did a lot of stuff as a family, but when I was younger, elementary school age, my dad worked a lot. I can recall nights where he wouldn't be home until after I was already in bed, Sarah admitted with a sigh. I guess no family is perfect. Some are more dysfunctional than others. Vincent commented knowingly. Silence enveloped them as they continued down the drive. Only the sound of their shoes crunching the gravel could be heard. When the large brick house came into view, Vincent let out a relieved breath as he caught sight of the brightly lit porch. The power was on, but it was eerily quiet, almost unnaturally so. He was used to the house bustling with life. Now it was deserted. Nice, Sarah commented, her pace quickening the closer they got. Are we going to the main house? Yeah, I have rooms in both houses, Vincent commented. Although he had 2 rooms, only one of them felt like home. He would prefer to stay in the guest house. It had always felt homier to him, probably because Emmett never went in there. But he was certain Sarah would not appreciate the mess in that house. After a few months of being dormant, it probably looked worse than he remembered. Both? Sarah questioned, quirking her brow up at him. I stayed in the guest house primarily, but when we had company over we played the Happy Family, and Dev and I stayed in the main house, he explained. He often wondered if they ever fooled any of their guests. Wow, and here I thought I was special having my own room growing up, and you had too, she teased. Vincent chuckled as they clambered up the steps but paused as he saw a small gray case hanging from the door. He'd expected the door to be unlocked. His family always left it that way. With the entire pack, there wasn't a need to lock it. Besides, a wolf could get in locked or not. You do have a key, right? Sarah asked warily. Of course I do. He grasped the gray box in his hand and yanked down, breaking it free from the door. A grin slid over his face as he pulled the panel open and held up the shiny brass key proudly. See? Superhuman strength. She rolled her eyes, smiling. Admit it, you're kind of jealous. I'll admit there are some aspects of being a wolf that might be nice, she answered honestly as he led them inside. He swallowed thickly as he took in the creamy walls and floral decor. His mother had free rein to decorate the house as she saw fit, everything except for Emmett's office. The rooms all flowed nicely together in light pastel colors. It was odd to be back at home. For one, he didn't think he'd ever see the place again. Beyond that, there were so many terrible memories associated with this place, especially when he considered the events leading up to their departure. Sarah sneezed in rapid succession, drawing him from his thoughts. You all right? He asked, worried. It's just a little dusty in here, she said, blinking. Sorry, he murmured. Sarah waved him off. It's a house, a real one. I can handle a little dust if it means a hot shower and a warm bed. Vincent smiled. He liked Sarah wasn't a complainer. While she looked like the girls he usually took home, she wasn't prissy and delicate. It was a trait that was really growing on him. Well, let me show you to Em's room. I'm sure she won't mind seeing as she abandoned all her wonderful clothes and girly bathroom. Sarah giggled as she followed him up the stairs and down the hall before pushing open the white door belonging to Emily's room. The lilac scent, reminiscent of his sister, invaded him, and he sighed, missing her terribly. He wondered if he'd ever get to see her again. Help yourself to whatever you need. I'll be down the hall getting cleaned up. Then we'll order some food, Vincent said, motioning for her to enter. Thanks. I'll see you in a few, she replied as she looked around the room. Holler if you need anything. He closed the door but didn't latch it as he left. His room was just a few doors down, close enough that he could get to her quickly if there were any issues. Sarah patted down the stairs, feeling refreshed and feminine for the first time in days. She'd even taken the time to blow dry her hair and toss it up into a messy bun. Emily's room was warm and inviting, just like its owner. It had been easy for Sarah to find her way around, and she'd quickly found a pair of cotton shorts and a tea to lounge in. Everything she could need was in the she-wolf's old bedroom, except for food and water. Her stomach growled at the thought of food, and she couldn't help but wonder where the kitchen was. She might not make it until the pizza arrived. As she wandered around the house, Sarah heard a muffled voice coming from behind a closed door. Crossing the living room, she followed the sound. She pushed on the oak door and paused in the entryway. Vincent stood with his back to her, shirtless, wearing only a pair of black mesh shorts. His cocoa brown hair stood up in spikes and was still wet from his shower. Sarah bit her lip. He looks good. Muscles rippled across his back as he pulled a wad of cash out of a birdhouse-shaped cookie jar. Great, thanks, he said, setting the cordless phone down on the blue graphite countertop. He turned around with a smile. Pizza and goodies will be here in 30 minutes. I got a variety. A large pepperoni, mild wings, fries, and Italian sub and cookies. I wanted to make sure I got things you liked. Sarah grinned. That sounds good. Especially the cookies. She was starving, and the thought of pizza made her taste buds salivate. Add on the cookies and she was in heaven. She hadn't had a sweet treat since her last shift at the cookie jar. That was weeks ago. Clearly she was overdue. How is your arm? Vincent asked, his eyes drifting to the cut on her arm. She held it up for him to see. It looks good. I'll probably have a scar, but it doesn't look infected, and it's healing, so I don't think we need to worry about it. Welcome to the Werewolf Claws Club. You're not an official member of the pack until you have claw scars, he joked. Glad to be an official member of the pack. So you want the official tour? Vincent asked, trying to avoid the awkward silence. Sure. Vincent motioned with his arms, gesticulating at the room. This is the kitchen, in case you didn't notice. He smirked with a wink. Sarah followed him as he walked across the light blue tiles to the door through which she entered. You should see the setup we have downstairs, he said excitedly, opening a door leading down into a finished basement. The plush white carpet squished between her toes. A massive TV she didn't even know how many inches hung from the wall. Against the back wall, a jade green leather wraparound sofa completed the man cave. She could easily see Vincent lounging down here on the couch. I can't believe this is still here, Vincent exclaimed, picking up a clear DVD case. Is that a rental? Sarah asked. Why? Are you worried about the astronomical late fee? Vincent asked, amused, turning on the DVD player and ejecting a disc. He held the disc up for her to see. We are so watching this tonight. Sarah squinted, trying to read the small print as she moved closer. Whatever movie this was, Vincent was clearly excited about it. She was curious to see the title. Teen Wolf, she read aloud. Never heard of it. Oh, come on, Vincent yelled enthusiastically. You have to watch this. As a classic. It's also completely wrong, but it's hilarious. Okay, Sarah agreed, interested to see what the movie was about. He was clearly excited, and she didn't want to ruin the mood. Besides, watching a movie would be fun. Come on, let's get everything set up so we can start it as soon as the pizza arrives. He grabbed her hand and tugged her to the stairs. Sarah jogged up the stairs after him, a wide smile on her face. The past few days had been horrendous, but right now it didn't seem so bad. They needed a night to relax. Sarah picked up her discarded paper plate and cup from the floor and followed Vincent upstairs. She'd eaten intermittently throughout the duration of the movie and was stuffed. It didn't help that Vincent had brought down so many delicious things to eat. He'd even made a bag of popcorn to accompany their feature film. The evening was perfect. Vincent had added his commentary throughout the movie. Between the film and her companion, she had laughed so much, her cheeks hurt. Good movie, right? He asked as he opened the door to the kitchen and held up the trash can lid for her. She threw her stuff away. Yeah. It had been okay. Not the usual thing that she watched, but she had gotten a kick out of Vincent's commentary. There's a sequel. We don't have it here though, and I'm going to guess I'm no longer allowed to rent movies unless I pay whatever fine they've charged me. I'm sure we can rent it in Texas, Sarah said, yawning. We must be getting old. Tired and ready for bed before 9, Vincent said, stifling his own yawn. Do you want to go to bed? Sarah paused, wondering where exactly they would go to bed. You can stay in M's room, or we can share a room, whatever you are most comfortable with, Vincent added quickly. Sarah bit her lip. There was something comforting about being in Vincent's embrace. He was warm and solid, and it just felt right. Tomorrow they would return to their crazy, chaotic lives. Who knew what the future held for them? Would they remain good friends, or was something more brewing between them? Again, she wondered what Vincent would taste like or feel pressed against her intimately. He was only a foot away from her. It would be easy to lean in and kiss him. Her heart skipped a beat as their eyes met. She could tell by the gleam in his eyes he was thinking along the same lines. Sarah, he whispered, leaning in and capturing her lips with his. He tasted like chocolate chip cookies. His lips melded against hers as she pulled him closer, winding her hands into his thick hair. At that moment it didn't matter what the future held. The only thing she cared about was this moment they were sharing. She'd been grieving and angry for so long. She needed to live again. Vincent made her feel alive, and even if she couldn't say it, she certainly could show. Sarah deepened the kiss, parting her lips to allow his tongue entrance. Vincent skimmed her teeth and nipped at her mouth. She trailed her fingers up his bare chest, smiling inwardly at the slight growl that escaped him. Wait, he pulled back, shaking his head. We can't do this. Sarah swallowed hard, stung by his rejection. It's not that I don't want to, he said. You're grieving, and then there's Lark and Devon. I like you, but I don't know if I can do an actual relationship, and I won't take advantage of you. I care about you too much to do that, he said honestly. Sarah nodded, biting her swollen bottom lip. I'm not looking for anything serious. I don't want to get attached to someone like that again, maybe never. Sarah started as a lump formed in her throat. I'm a big girl and I can make my own decisions. Lark respects that. As for Preston, her voice broke. Yes, she missed him, but there was more to it than anyone realized. It was her fault he was dead. I loved him, but for me it wasn't the forever kind of love. He was safe and familiar and my best friend. I miss him and I wish he was here, but most of all I feel guilty. Guilty that I didn't love him enough. He wanted to move things to the next level and I told him no. If I'd said yes, she trailed off, tears building in her eyes as a wave of hurt washed over her. Vincent ran a hand through his hair, his eyes widening with realization. Jean wouldn't have sent him if Preston was in a committed relationship. Her bottom lip trembled and she let out a raw sob of remorse. It's my fault. He died. Mine. She spun, ready to bolt out of the room, but Vincent caught her wrist and tugged her back to him. He cupped her chin and stared down into her eyes. I was there when he died, and it was not your fault. Instead of being a coward, you were honest with him about your feelings. Telling the truth is always better than telling a lie. Preston's death is not your fault. It's the Gulf Packs. They did this, Vincent insisted. Sarah closed her eyes, letting a tear slide down her face. But if I just told a lie, he would still be here. He was my best friend long before we were more, and it's my fault he died. I have to live with that. Stricken by what she had just did with Vincent and her rejection of Preston, she jerked free of his grip and dashed out of the room. She needed to be alone. Chapter 10. Vincent rested his forehead on the palm of his hand. Stupid. 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 Never should have kissed her. Worse, he didn't know if he should go after her or not. Wooing girls was easy, this thing with Sarah not so much. What is going on with Sarah? It was raw and confusing, that much he knew for sure. He should try to sort things out with her tonight. The last thing he wanted was for things to be awkward. A part of him wondered if what she said about Preston was true. He couldn't find a reason she would lie about it. It at least eased his guilt a little. She was Preston's girl and he had been infatuated with her. But that didn't matter now, he could sort that out on his own sometime later. Talking about the deceased wolf probably wouldn't be a good idea either, at least not tonight. He picked up a cookie he'd seen the way she'd been eyeing it, and hoped it would be a good peace offering. She'd stomped up the stairs, no doubt returning to Emily's room. He nervously took the steps 2 at a time. Talking to girls and comforting them wasn't exactly his thing. The bedroom door was ajar, and he knocked on the wall to alert her to his presence. "Come in," she sighed loudly as she gave him an apprehensive look. She sat up on the bed and put a book down on the nightstand. "I brought a cookie," he offered, holding out the dessert. Sarah drew her knees into her chest and took the cookie. "I'm sorry," she blurted. "Don't be." "I crossed the line. I shouldn't have done that," Vincent insisted. "It's both of our fault." "You want half?" she asked, breaking the cookie in 2. As she abruptly changed the subject. "I always have room for chocolate," he grinned. They each took a bite out of their half of the cookie. Vincent took a seat in Emily's computer chair and spun around to face Sarah. He knew he should say something to end the silence, but he didn't know what it should be. "So," Sarah started, "we are going to call Malachi tomorrow? We'll have to go into the dungeon to find the number," he explained. Sarah frowned, her eyebrow rising in question. "Emmett's office," he clarified. "Bad things happened in there." "Oh, only time I ever went in there was when I was in trouble." "I can go in there instead," Sarah offered. Vincent paused, not expecting her offer. The sentiment was nice and he appreciated how caring she was. "No, it's okay. I know where his stuff is." Juarez and his men probably swept the place. In fact, I'm sure they did. "I bet it's a mess in there, but I guarantee they didn't find everything. My dad was very vigilant about certain things. He always seemed to be one step ahead." Emmett had been ahead of the game, at least up until the end. His scheming started early and only expanded over the years. Vincent twisted in the chair as a tic formed in his jaw. A memory flooded his mind and he exhaled angrily. "You know, my mom and Emmett grew up here together. They were best friends throughout their childhood. I don't know if it was the power of being alpha, or the jealousy he felt over not being my mom's true mate, but something changed. He outsmarted Joseph, Dev's dad, and lure him into a trap. Also, he could claim my mom as his own. I often wonder how we escaped someone that manipulative." Sarah shook her head back and forth slowly. "Jealousy and power can drive people to do crazy things. I know how territorial your wolf is. Maybe it just drove him mad, and once everything started spiraling, he couldn't keep up." Sarah suggested. Vincent would like to think she was right. It would be nice to know that there had been at least a little good in the man who was his father. Surely there had been some decency in him if his mother had befriended him in her early years. Maybe rage and envy had been too much for him to handle. Sarah relaxed back into the pillows. A soft, sad sigh escaped her lips. "You know, my dad was the doctor for Rick's pack. That's how Lark found out about werewolves. After Lark found out, she told me Lark and I don't keep secrets from each other. Anyway, I came out with my dad one afternoon after he'd received a call about 2 seriously injured wolves. Turns out 2 of the younger wolves got into a fight over a girl from school. She was dating one wolf and the other tried to make a move on her. Well, the 2 nearly killed each other. Rick was hesitant about even letting my dad in the infirmary to help them because they were still trying to kill each other. Maybe it's just instinct to fight for the woman you love. Claire was with Devon's father first. Maybe it drove Emmett mad. Even after he had her, it still wasn't enough for him," Sarah contemplated. Vincent saw her point. "Regardless, it doesn't excuse what he did, what he tried to do. But we can be very territorial. I wouldn't be able to sleep in another wolf's bed or wear their clothes. Their scent would be too much." "So you'll be staying down the hall?" Sarah asked, her face unreadable. Vincent wished he could backpedal his previous statement. M's scent wasn't offensive to him. They were twins and had shared a womb. In some ways her scent was comforting to him. He needed to feel Sarah out to see what she wanted. "Do I want him to stay or go?" He wouldn't mind staying. It was oddly nice holding her through the night. He cleared his throat. "M's room isn't so bad. She's my twin and we did have to live in a womb together for 9 months. We're a lot closer because of it. He watched Sarah carefully, trying to figure her out, but her face remained impassive and he didn't want to create further friction between them. But I'll stay in my room down the hall. That's cool, she replied as she yawned. Vincent nodded, wishing he knew if she really wanted him to go, or if she secretly enjoyed sleeping with him as much as he enjoyed staying with her. He wanted her in his room, in his bed, preferably underneath him or on top. But that wasn't a good idea. After that kiss, things could quickly escalate between them, and he didn't want to hurt her. He stood up and stretched, watching as Sarah's eyes wandered up his bare chest. To his eyes, yeah, it is definitely time to leave. Otherwise he might do something stupid and make things weird again. I'm heading to bed. I'm just down the hall, the first door on the left. You need anything, don't hesitate to let me know. Sarah's tongue darted out to wet her lips, causing him to groan inwardly. They needed to get back to Texas so they could put some much-needed distance between them. All this one-on-one time was torture. Sarah bit her lip, indecision clear on her face. She inhaled sharply as their eyes met and swallowed, holding his gaze for a long moment. No one knows we are here. I think we'll be okay for the night, she mumbled, averting his gaze. Vincent nodded. It was for the best. Being alone in bed with Sarah would not lead to anything good. Well, at least not good for their friendship. I'll set the perimeter alarm. If someone comes on the property, we'll know. Vincent stood up and walked to the door and placed his hand on the knob. Night. Good night, she replied softly. Abilene, Texas. Lark stared out the passenger side window as they pulled up to the farmhouse. The car was silent, aside from the quiet hum of the engine. They'd spent the entire day in Dallas. Neither Vincent, Sarah, or the Lunas had shown up. It was infuriating and heart-wrenching all at the same time. Lark just wanted some resolution. She refused to think it was already staring her in the face. Surely she couldn't be the only one to think so. Daniel and Nora wouldn't have come if they thought otherwise. Devin pulled the car to a stop. Nora and Daniel climbed out, silently shutting the door behind them and leaving her alone with Devin. I have to check in with Jean, but I'll be back as soon as I can, Devin assured, leaning in to kiss her. I love you. We're going to sort this out. I know. I love you too, she said against his lips, then opened her door. Devin's hand grasped onto her wrist. I mean it, Lark. I'm going to talk to Jean and see if there is anything else we can do. Someone used that card and it doesn't make sense that anyone but Vincent would use it. The prepaid cards can only be tracked if you know the number. If we can get it from my mom, maybe we can find out where the tickets purchased were headed. Something is definitely going on, and I don't think it's the Lunas. All the pieces aren't adding up. Thanks, Lark whispered, placing another soft peck on his lips. It meant a lot that he believed in her. Get some rest. I'll see you in a bit, Devin promised. Lark nodded and exited the vehicle, feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders. She clambered up the porch steps. It had been a long and depressing day. You okay? Nora asked as she and Daniel came out of the kitchen carrying cans of Coke. Yeah, she sighed. It's going to be okay, Nora replied soothingly. I know. I'm just not ready to let go yet, Lark admitted wearily, hoping they didn't think she was being foolish. At least Devin acknowledged something was afoul, but she couldn't help wondering how everyone else felt. She knew this ordeal had to be hard on both Devin and Daniel, and she didn't want to add any extra stress, especially if they thought she was crazy. You know, Daniel spoke up. My dad would have made a spectacle of them. Their faces would have been visible in the pictures if he had been the one to send them. I would think the Lunas and Juarez would have the same twisted mentality, particularly since my dad and Charles Luna were friends. But their faces, Lark trailed off, trying to understand what he was saying. There had only been bodies, the faces had been hidden. Daniel ran a hand over his face. There really isn't a valid reason for them to keep refusing to send us the bodies unless they have something they are trying to hide. We killed quite a few of their men. It wouldn't have been hard to get a body. And the female body, well, if they have connections with a hospital, funeral home, or morgue, or they know someone who does. Daniel explained, trailing off. Lark shuddered. She was a little taken back at how creepy that sounded, knowing what Daniel said was 100% true. But why go to all that trouble? Nora asked, rejoining the conversation. Daniel shrugged. They would be good hostages, the Alpha's brother and his mate's sister. It would give them leverage over us. He cleared his throat as he looked down to the ground. And Sarah is a fertile female. It's hard to come by girls that no one is going to miss. The last thing any pack wants is an investigation in their area, and they know this is something we can't involve the police in without risking exposing our species. Lark closed her eyes. She wasn't sure which was worse, Sarah being dead or living a life as a breeder against her will. A shudder ripped down her spine. Sarah wasn't exactly in her right mind the last time she saw her. Would she do something extreme? Look, if they're out there together, Vincent will take care of her. And I'm sure there is a reason they haven't called. If the Lunas want us to think they're dead, they wouldn't have used his card. They know even prepaid cards can be tracked as long as you have the number. For now, we just have to hope. The two of them know what they're doing, Daniel explained. Daniel thinks they are alive too. Relief washed over her and she closed her eyes, saying a silent prayer. She was thankful she wasn't the only one still clinging to hope. But at the moment they didn't have much they could do. I guess we don't have a choice but to wait it out, Lark sighed. Guyman, Oklahoma. Sarah shot up in bed. Her eyes darted around the unfamiliar room. Took her a long, terrifying moment to place where she was before letting out a relieved breath as her racing heart slowed. The room was quiet and only illuminated by the pale moonlight. She wasn't sure what had woken her, but after a few minutes with nothing amiss, she chalked it up to the unfamiliar surroundings. She swallowed, licking her dry lips. Her throat was parched and there was no way she'd get back to sleep without getting a cold drink of water. She pushed back the covers and tiptoed across the room. The door creaked as she opened it, and she cringed, hoping it wouldn't wake Vincent. They'd made peace, but her body still remembered the way they melded together. It felt too right. She didn't want to remember. In fact, it would be better if she forgot. Sarah pushed open the kitchen door and let out a startled yelp. Vincent peered up at her, a slice of pizza halfway to his mouth. "Late night snack?" he asked, motioning to the box on the counter. Sarah closed her eyes and took a second to compose herself. "No thanks." "Where are the glasses, though?" she asked, looking around at the dark cherry cupboards. "To your right, third door over." Sarah turned around and reached up into the cupboard, drawing out a dark blue glass. She walked to the sink, aware of Vincent's eyes on her. A shudder tore through her and heat pooled within her. What in the world is going on with him? And me? Whatever it was, she needed to get a handle on it. She closed her eyes and opened them as she flipped on the water, filling the cup halfway. "You sure you don't want any pizza before I put it away?" Vincent asked. "I'm good." Sarah kept her back to him but could hear the box shuffling around behind her, and the creak of the fridge door opening. "Can't sleep either?" Vincent guessed, hopping up on the counter a few feet away from her. Sarah turned to him. Her breath caught in her throat. He was shirtless again. The black shorts sat low on his hips. He looked too good. She averted her eyes and stared down into her drink. Unfamiliar place, comfortable bed. "Guess I got used to sleeping on the hard ground," she stammered, forcing the lukewarm liquid down her throat. "It's this house." Vincent looked around the kitchen. "Last time I was here wasn't exactly pleasant." "That's right," Sarah murmured. "They took you with Lark." How could she have possibly forgotten about that? "You were a prisoner here, weren't you?" She wasn't entirely sure she wanted to know the answer to that question. "Yeah, Marcus had it worse than I did." "I'm sorry," Sarah said sincerely. "Not your fault." He waved her off, trying to make light of the situation. She didn't want Vincent to be uncomfortable here. If he would feel better elsewhere, she would give up her comfort to help him. "We could go to the guest house if you want. Or get a hotel," she offered. "Nah. Besides, we still need to look through my dad's office sometime soon. Maybe a mission would help distract him from his memories." If she'd gotten the drink and went back upstairs to bed, she would have fallen asleep, but after the scare of finding him down here and talking, she didn't think sleep would find her again soon. "Did you want to do that now?" she asked. "No better time than the present." He hopped down from the counter, a tight smile on his face as he walked toward the door. Sarah set her glass in the sink and followed him. They walked quietly down the long hallway until Vincent stopped in front of a closed door. His hand reached out, but he seemed to hesitate. After a long moment, he twisted the knob and shoved the door open, letting out a long breath. "Wow," he whispered. Sarah peered over his shoulder. The room was trashed. Books, paper, and pieces of furniture littered the floor. "Do you think it's still here?" Sarah asked. "It looks like they were pretty thorough," Vincent mumbled. "But my dad always had a backup. I bet they didn't find it." "How can you be so sure?" Sarah questioned, curiously wondering how he knew. Vincent grinned. "I can't give away all my secrets." He walked into the room and kneeled next to a register vent. He pried it away from the wall and reached inside. Sarah held her breath, hoping he found whatever it was he was searching for. If they could turn their two enemies against each other, it could change the entire course of the war. Vincent hooped and looked at her with a grin as he dragged a large book out from behind the wall. "What is that?" Sarah asked, hurrying to him. "My dad's journals and important documents. We should have everything we need in here." Sarah let out a breath she hadn't even realized she'd been holding and said a silent prayer. Their plan was going to work. It had to. They'd come too far to fail now.